welcome to the Chop! And today a special episode dedicated to that train wreck that people call RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under, aka how to franchise your business without giving a shit about the end result as long as you get paid for those sweet, sweet royalties. Now the show is messy. How messy, you ask? Well, it is so messy that it managed to set a record for representation in media of all the wonderful ways in which you can actually fuck it up. It has it all, just pick your poison, from very questionable casting process to behind the scene controversies regarding way too many queens, uninspired challenges, product placement, queens coming back for no apparent reasons, a ton of shock value, including the elimination of frontrunner Anita Wiglet, nonsensical critiques that were pushed upon the viewer to justify placement that made absolutely no sense, and that's why we call them critiques, of course. And least we forget, a panel of judges with zero chemistry or charisma whatsoever. And yes, I am talking to you, Rhys Nicholson. I don't give a shit if you hold the Guinness World Record for oldest twink alive. You are boring. I'd rather watch Nina West eating feet live on stage rather than listening to you one more time. And as a matter of fact, I think I'll just replace you. There we go. Perfect. As you can imagine, the audience was not particularly amused. Now, we could literally spend hours talking about all of those topics, but time is of the essence. The essence of beauty, of course. And in my opinion, those are just the symptoms of something far more pervasive that was going on behind the scene, not the actual cause. So what the hell happened? Well, let me cut to the chase immediately. It looks like production was badly rushed. I'm not even sure that rushed is the correct word here. They literally moved through all the stages of production at the speed of light, seemingly cutting every possible corner and maybe even making some new ones so that they could cut those as well. The show was announced back in 2019, before everything that happened in the world actually happened, causing many difficulties and delay, including production moving from Australia to New Zealand. The problem is, it looks like the network wanted the show to premiere the 1st of May 2021, and that deadline was non-negotiable, drastically impacting each and every aspect of production, from location to casting, filming, storyline development, and editing. Let's start with casting. On RuPaul's Drag Race, a casting call would be put out roughly 6 months before filming actually begins, and you will be asked many questions regarding your drag family, if you have beef with anyone, what are your social media profiles, YouTube channels, Instagram, and so on and so forth. Then you'll be asked to send an audition tape and pictures in drag, out of drag, and only after all of that, if they're interested, you will be sent the contract. But you're not on the cast yet, because in the contract you still have to fill in a background questionnaire, authorized background checks including medical checks, and of course criminal records. And it's still not over yet. If they're interested in you, you still have to go through a psychological evaluation and probably a couple more interviews. Point is, casting is a long process. They need to know who you are, your talents, personality, if you're even fit to participate, or if you are a good fit with the kind of stories that they would like to develop for the season. Not to mention having a good chemistry with the queens that are already cast on the show, and if you watched season 13, you know how important it is to have good chemistry between your participant. Nothing like this happened for Down Under. According to Courtney Act, so this is not some random anonymous person out there, it's fucking Courtney Act. They didn't even do a proper casting. They invited the queens that they wanted to participate on the show. A casting producer simply went on Instagram and messaged queens he was interested in, from an account that, and you're going to love this, exclusively featured pictures of Sphinx cats. You know, those one without hair. You cannot make this shit up if you try it. And that's it. That was casting. And when you judge people based on their social media, well, you never know what you're really getting. And once they're in, they're in. And you have to go along with whatever surfaces while you're still filming. Which kind of might explain what happened with Scarlet and Karen. You didn't see that coming, did you? And it gets worse, of course it gets worse. Let's move on to filming, story producing, and editing. Woo! Filming began at the end of January 2021, and you know that the season is 8 episodes long. So, how long did it take to film? Well, let's go with the best case scenario. Let's say 2 or 3 episodes per week, which leaves us a total of 2 months and a half for story producing and editing, which is way too little time. As a comparison, Drag Race US on average takes 6 months for this stage of production, and for a very good reason. Let me explain you why. When you film and record a bunch of people for 10-15 hours a day for 5 to 6 weeks, you are left with a ton of material. A lot of things happened on set and almost nothing makes it to the final cut. There is simply too much material. So, what producers will do is pick and choose different aspects of what happened on set and use those as building blocks to create a storyline. A compelling narrative that can efficiently, emphasis on the word efficiently because time is of the essence, describe a queen, her motivations, her interactions, in general, her journey in the competition. And you have literally thousands of hours of audiovisual material to do just that. Now imagine if you have a bag with hundreds of thousands of words and sentences, and you can pick whatever you want, use it to tell a story, and discard everything else. And that's your story producing. Then with a little bit of editing magic, you can polish your characters and their storylines, and your post-production is finally done. But remember, story producing is a very hard job, because when you have so much materials, you can tell many different stories in many different ways. So it will mostly depend on the material you start with, what the producers want to appear on screen, what the network wants to appear on screen, and the general cohesiveness of all the storylines for all the contestants. So you can easily be a villain, discarding anything positive and exaggerating all the negatives, or maybe you can look confident, or look like a hero, or be redeemed. You get the gist. But all these storylines really have to be consistent with each other's. You cannot afford to have someone portrayed as a victim while his bully is having a redemption storyline at the same time. It would be a mess. It's not good storytelling. You have to be consistent. So what happens if you actually don't have time for story producing? Well, you're going to need to cut corners. Of course, you're going to need to cut those fucking corners, and a ton of them, because you cannot afford the luxury of letting things just happen naturally and organically. You need to give it a little bit of a push so that queens will react the way you want them to react, and each one will fall in line with their storyline and elimination order that could have been very well decided even before filming begun. I know, it's uninspired, it's immoral, it betrays the spirit of reality TV portraying reality, but guess what? It works. People actually buy it. Well, they buy it most of the time. What you will do is leverage whatever you can in order to have the queens to hopefully behave in the way you want them to behave, especially to one another. And we have many examples of this, but most notably the Cryptiques. And you heard it right, it's Cryptiques, not critiques. A cryptique is bullshit masquerading as feedback in order to justify placements that have little to nothing to do with the queen's actual performance. And the most notable example is what happened to Electra Shock back in episode 3. That's the one thing that everyone saw for the bullshit it actually was. Because for 13 seasons, we heard the judges say things like, oh, you need to steal the show, you need to be seen, you don't have to fade in the background, especially if it's a group challenge, and so on and so forth. Those things are staples of Drag Race, and here we have a queen critiqued and put up for elimination for doing exactly that. And they desperately tried to justify it as, oh, you had to share the spotlight, oh, what you did was selfish, but it made absolutely no sense for anyone who watched Drag Race even in the past 3 years. Bullshit critiques like this are the norm on Drag Race Down Under, making the show unfair to the contestants and, in all honesty, disrespectful to the viewers, because we are not a bunch of imbeciles. And the Cryptiques are just the tip of the iceberg, because there's a ton of shit that you can still do behind the scenes in order to push everyone into their right place. But I will leave that to your own imaginations, I'm not going to go into that. And after all of this is done, A little bit of editing magic will teleport the queens among space and time to have them say whatever you want and to whoever you want them to. And that will put the final polish on your turd of a show. But what happens if the turd is not convincing enough, not engaging enough? Well, in that case, you can use something that's usually very effective in media. That's called shock value. In a nutshell, shock value is whatever you use when you know that almost nobody is ever going to buy whatever you're desperately trying to sell. And we have a ton of examples of that, from eliminating Art Simone, a queen that at the time looked like she was going to be a frontrunner, to bringing back Art Simone 2 episodes later for no apparent reason whatsoever other than justifying having one more episode in the season. You know, it's good advertisement money. More episodes, more money. More money, less problems. Everyone knows that, especially all the producers that worked on season 13. Then we have the elimination of Anita Wiglet very early on, one of the most talented queens in the cast. And of course, who can forget about our dear Scarlet and how it looked like she was going to be disqualified, only to find out she was on her way to a redemption edit. What a twist, what a shock. You interested? You still watching? And here again, way to catch two birds with one rock, because it looks to me like no one had any idea of the shit that she did on stage multiple times. And what do you do when you suddenly find out that your frontrunner is in deep shit? Well, you can use that for shock value, while simultaneously also pushing a message that will make you look good and enlightened, a message of understanding, a message of acceptance. Which you can imagine sounds really genuine coming from a production that for years seemingly typecasted queens of colors as villains on their show, then edited them to make them look even worse, then conveniently decided to shut the fuck up on social media while those queens were eaten alive and being threatened in real life. What can I say? Way to go, World of Wonder. We believe you. And speaking of bullshit, let's talk about Scarlet for a moment, because on a personal level, you have to understand me. I agree with the message that was sent by RuPaul. What do I mean by that? Well, what Scarlet did was insensitive, it was disrespectful, but it's far from the worst cases of racism that I've seen in the world, and I can understand making a mistake while you're still growing up, because at some point we have all been young, dumb, and full of and that's okay, as long as you make amends and learn from your mistake. The fucking point is, you can't seriously expect to brush up the whole thing just by saying that you're sorry and promising not to do that shit again. What tells me that you're not just full of shit? Tell me, where's the commitment? For example, back in season 10, Asia O'Hara fucked it up big time during the season finale. Guess what she did next? She apologized, she promised not to do it again, and then she volunteered for 2 months to make amends for her mistake. So, Scarlet, your apology is welcome. But I'm still waiting for those couple hundred hours of community service in favor of social minorities. And by community service, I don't mean performing in drag at a retirement home. Until I see a real commitment, I'll just assume you are full of shit and never mention you again. And now, to conclude, this season was a complete mess. But let's try to get some closure here. How do you make it better? Well, to start, take your time while casting these queens and do a proper background check, because people that do shit like this need to make amends first before being offered the opportunity of a lifetime and a career that will impact countless younger generations. Then get a dynamic group of queens that will work well together and don't push their storylines too much. Let things happen organically, and based on that, then you tell your story. A little bit of editing magic is completely fine, this is TV after all, but there is a clear line between making a compelling TV show and making shit up. You can create engaging challenges that stimulate the queen's creativity and talent and give them a little bit of power with the mini challenge. I mean, it doesn't have to be a ton of power, but even a little bit, because it will make the show more engaging. And finally, hire someone with charisma and talent to actually judge those queens. No shade to Rhys Nicholson, but to me, he lacks both. Not to mention that he has like zero chemistry with RuPaul and Michelle Visage. Now, I'm not saying you need to get Courtney out, since we know very well that there was beef between Courtney and Ru, and RuPaul is still the star of the show, so I can understand why they wouldn't get Courtney. It's okay, it's just business. But still, there's gotta be someone more qualified than the oldest twink alive to do this fucking job properly. And with that said, let's look at the bright side. Next season of Down Under cannot be any worse than this. Or can it? We're going to see about that. Anyway, thank you so much to our patrons for supporting the channel, and welcome to our latest addition, Mina U. Benjamin. And no, I'm not going to pronounce the middle name because you have to understand, you just sent me a tip. I'm not going to butcher part of your name, so that's the shout out for you. If you wish to support the channel as well, there is a link of course in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on Sunday for the next live stream. Have a great weekend.